Hey everybody, it's Keisha's Corner. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to have someone join me who has a lot of titles. Derek calls him his little buddy. He calls him my day husband, but he's a pastor, he's a father, and he is one of my dearest friends. This is Reverend Eric Thomas. Thank you for joining
My
us.
pleasure, my pleasure.
And we talk about a lot of things
All the time.
all the time. Some things that we probably can't even put on YouTube. But today, I want us to have a conversation about faith.
Okay.
Beginning with that.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people who are experiencing anxiety right now, and there's a lot to be anxious about.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at social media, there are wars going on. People are uncertain about how they're going to pay their bills, and you name it, people are dealing with it. And I think with social media, it's even more so because it's sometimes difficult to get away from news that's not so great.
Correct.
So I want you to talk to us a little bit just about the role that faith plays, as well as how we balance that with maintaining and preserving our mental health.
Okay. Well, first of all, to understand the concept of faith, everybody has it. The problem and the question becomes, who is your faith in? People, if you depend on yourself, then your faith is in yourself. If you depend on money, your faith is in your money. But the reality is, that's the reason why so many people are stressed. So many people have anxiety. So many people are uncertain about their futures because their faith is in something that they control. And it's a human thing. If you go in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you'll see whole nations that relied on their military power, relied on their might, relied on their commerce in order to succeed. And so if that was ever in jeopardy, the reality was their faith in that or their anxiety increased because of that. What has made the people of God always, and I'm not going to say that we don't have anxiety, but I am going to say that having faith in God, trusting Him because He's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, changes the game altogether. So let's say for example you're sick and you say, I don't know what I'm going to do. If that means at that very moment you're thinking it's in your hands. But if you're a child of God, you recognize that it's not in your hands, and you put it in the hands of Him who can handle everything. And so I think now, as I talk to more and more people and kind of begin to understand that even in the church, quite frankly, people go to church, they read the Bible, they pray, but they still rely on themselves. They're trusting, their faith is in themselves or something they can handle or something they can control. And as a result, they find themselves anxious as a result of it.
Let's talk about going to church.
Okay.
A lot of us, myself included, became bedside Baptists
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic and haven't gotten in the routine of going back
Okay.
to church. And I've read articles that saying especially young people aren't going physically into churches. They are watching it on television or watching it on their devices if they are engaging at all. What are you seeing at your church?
So I had church fun the entirety of the pandemic, and I think you may know this, may not know this. So on March 15th, just before the pandemic started, I was in the hospital with a 3-day trip after my transplant. And while I was there, the Lord told me to have Bible study every night. I heard it crystal clear. And so I called the church on the 15th. It was a Sunday. And I called my church administrator, my executive pastor. I said, listen, we're going to start having Bible study tonight. So I had Bible study every night. Matter of fact, I still have it. So it's been 140 days since I started Bible study. But the point I'm making is that during that time, we were having Bible study every night. First it was on the phone, then it was on Zoom. Then we started live streaming from my den. And so we didn't have, during the pandemic when we couldn't go to church, we still made the church experiences as real as possible. So when we started back going to church, which was for December of 21, it was as if we had never stopped. And so not only did we not really have a fallout, we've picked up, like, I haven't, my congregation back now, my participation in Sunday service is above what it was before the pandemic.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's much more. Not only is it more people, but it's more participation. It's more people who are engaged in ministry. So it's not just on Sunday mornings. It's on Wednesday. Like our Bible study Wednesday night has grown beyond what it was prior to the pandemic.
So why do you think people are turning away from organized religion? I mean, we talk all the time about my pastor, Reverend M.L. Ragland,
Right.
First Corinth Missionary Baptist Church on Bankhead Highway, who was a pastor's pastor. He was the epitome of what you want the leader of a flock
Right.
to be. Now we see so many people who don't trust
Yeah.
the leaders of churches, of organized churches, and they don't want anything to do with organized religion.
Because I think the church, Pastor Ragland is a good example. Pastor Ragland was a pastor. He had a shepherd's heart, which meant that he was not just preaching to people on Sunday. He was engaged in their everyday lives, whether it was giving out a certificate for somebody graduating or just calling somebody when they were sick, going to visit somebody in the hospital, praying for them,
I remember
all of
my
those things.
my grandmother always told this story of needing to go to court. And it's a crazy story. There was some woman who essentially was stalking my grandmother, and she had to take this woman to court. And Reverend Ragland went to
In the
court
court,
with
yeah.
her. And I know more about Reverend Ragland sitting in that courtroom than I know about this
Right.
woman who was harassing my grandmother.
Right. So Pastor Ragland, and I like that's a great example for Atlanta, was a community-based pastor, which meant that his ministry started there, but it grew out into the community. Now, keeping that in mind, today, unfortunately, there are less and less community-based churches. There are mega churches, and I'm not slamming mega churches. I think they have their place, but the problem is that there's no connection, there's no relationship, pastoral relationship with the congregation, and so young people, if you grew up in a
I don't think that's fair, is it? I
that
mean, I would think the pastor of a mega church would disagree with you that
yeah,
there's
we
not a
could, but
connection
I
because
mean, I put it
they
like
do it in bite-sized pieces, right? Everybody may not be able to touch and interact with the pastor like a Reverend Ragland, but there's probably an associate pastor or some other ministry that they can connect with.
but it's still not pastor. It's still not pastor. And again, this is not a slam. I put it like this: without being able to see very well at church, if I see a row and I see the Smith family not there for 2 weeks, if I don't see them, I'm calling them to see if everybody's okay. You can't do that if you got 3,000 members, and you can't do it if you got 1,500 people in the congregation. Again, this is not a slam at mega pastors. I'm just saying that in relation to your question, there are the churches that stayed open in the pandemic, the churches that the pastor kept was involved no matter what, no matter whether they were in the building or not. Those churches have thrived after post pandemic. Churches that were contingent and based upon, you know, just that's my church. I go. I'm not involved in any ministry. I don't sing. I don't dance. I don't usher. It's more easy to let go of something you never was holding on to in the first place. So I think that, and again, this is not me slamming about it. I just know that community based pastors, our churches didn't dry up and blow away. They maintained. Of course, there were some smaller churches that, because of the pandemic and because of the not having the income, unfortunately, ceased to exist or ceased to participate or failed to thrive. But the reality is, I think that those who maintain the constant contact with their congregations, the pandemic's impact was lessened, or even in some cases it was reversed, and so it came out better on the other side.
So with the pandemic and wars and all these things that people are seeing, and we heard this occasionally throughout our lives. We're at the end of days. We're at the end of days. What do you say to people who are dealing with that anxiety? And are we at the end of days per biblical teaching?
Well, the first thing about biblical teaching about the end of times is you won't see it coming. First of all, there's been wars and rumors of wars all our lives. I mean, I'm 56. There's always been a war, and there's always been about to be a war. The Bible is crystal clear that despite the fact that we read these signs, we still don't know the day. We can't say, oh, we got 3 weeks left, or we got any time left. The Bible says that only God knows the day. Jesus doesn't even know when he's coming back. God will say today is the day, and Jesus will return. So the end of days concept, to me, is something that is real because people feel it. But the reality is, look, if you're just looking at the signs of the time, that in and of itself doesn't tell you as much as you think it does. Now, people are having anxiety because of that. People are seeing things. People are anxious about it. And that goes back to our original question about faith. A lot of times people feel helpless and hopeless because they can't control the outcome. But for the person who trusts God, the outcome is in his hands. And so we rely totally on him. And I've learned this especially the last 7 years. I've learned it crystal clearly that when you just say, Lord, I can't do this. I'm giving it over to you. When I'm leaning and depending on you, then there's a lessening of your anxiety. There's a lessening of your fears and doubts. And then there's a formation of faith. I'm trusting God, and that's what it boils down to. Like countless times I can say, I don't know how to handle this, but I'm gonna trust God. I'm gonna give it to Him. And it's just not saying it. It's an action. Me saying I'm just gonna trust God's not enough. It's me praying and then relying on God, waiting on Him. And sometimes it requires waiting. Sometimes it requires patience.
But what about those people who don't believe, as Christians do, that Jesus is the Savior, and they believe in a higher being, but not necessarily God as we do in our faith? How does that work for them?
Now, for the Christian, our Savior is alive. Our who we have relied on and trusting is alive. For those who worship idol gods, it's a routine. I'm going to chant these amount of times. I'm going to do these amount of things, and hopefully karma will bring me back to the good place, or my ritualism or my chanting will calm me down. It's not a thing where you're trusting anybody. You're just basically saying, I can do this. I can handle this myself if I get myself in the right space. By the power of God, by the presence of Jesus, who gives us a relationship with God, and by the presence of the Holy Spirit, who secures in us that we have, in fact, a relationship with God. So it's a different, tighter dynamic here with the Christian.
And how do you balance faith and seeing about yourself, whether it's seeing a mental health professional, whether it's seeing a doctor? I know people who've said, well, I trust that God's going to heal me, so I'm not going to see a doctor. Or people who are struggling with mental health challenges say, I have faith.
Yeah.
I'm going to pray, and these demons will be removed. How do you balance that?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, we must understand that God uses those health professionals to be a conduit to our health and healing. So to say that I'm not going to see a doctor and trust God's going to do it Himself is to say that God didn't provide the doctor. Fundamentally, I disagree. Well, obviously, I disagree with that, because going to a doctor's thing, I think everybody should do. God created the body, but He allowed doctors to learn about the body. I still think that your reliance is on God, but you still allow who God sends you to be the method through which you are healed, sustained, and have health. Likewise, with mental health. One thing, and we're working, I'm on the board at Grady as well, and one of the things we're working
Grady
on.
Hospital.
Grady Hospital, yes. And one of the things we're working on now is the Church of Mental Health. Fully 60% of, and I'm speaking specifically now of the African American congregation, Black congregation, 60% of people in our churches have some level of mental health issue.
60%?
60%.
Wow.
Something that could be defined as a mental health issue.
How do you measure that?
It was a study that was done recently, and there was a questionnaire asked, and so some of the things that I identified was depression, PTSD, anxiety. They would just ask a series of questions, and the questions weren't necessarily geared toward digging out mental health. They were just questions that were asked congregants, and they revealed that mental health was a real issue, that there are people in the congregations who are suffering with these things. They're existing with them, but they're suffering with them, and to see a therapist, to see a counselor. And a lot of times the counselor needs to be beyond the pastor. Pastoral counseling is one thing. Real mental health counseling is a whole other ballgame. And there's professionals who are trained to do it. There's some who are trained, cross-trained, who are licensed clinical social workers, or licensed clinical therapists, I should say, but also Christian counselors. But the reality is, I encourage anybody who's suffering mentally and can't sometimes be defined as something's wrong. I just can't get in gear. I can't get my groove back. See somebody, to talk to somebody. Anger. Some people pin up anger because of some past hurt. Some people have frustration.
People don't think of anger in terms of a mental health challenge.
Yeah, and it is, and it can become corrosive. If you're angry long enough, it corrodes you. It makes you hostile. It makes you anxious. It makes you nervous. It can make you can't sleep.
Yeah, it makes you insecure. I mean, go down the list.
The list, yeah, and then sometimes it can start with something as simple as just being mad, angry.
So, you are a walking profile of health challenges for Black men. I can say that because you're my friend.
Right.
You asthma, chronic asthma. You've had a heart transplant. Prostate challenges. Did I miss anything?
I had my hip replaced.
Oh, hip replacement. You're just a bionic man.
Yeah, I got a lot of different things happening. Yeah, I get teased about that. Especially my doctor teases about that too, because I've had so many surgeries back to back.
So you have on glasses. How's your
glasses.
Hearing?
Yeah, my hearing is just I can hear what I want to hear. Some people challenge my hearing, but I went the other day and I got it. It was okay.
And I can laugh with you
Yeah.
because we're friends. But I always say, you're very fragile.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you are here.
I'm here. I'm here.
So talk to us about these health challenges
Mhm.
and is this the price of being a black man or what? I
That's
mean,
a
I
good
know you're
question,
not
yeah.
a physician, but
Yeah, I think. Well, I think that
how's your blood pressure?
my blood pressure. The funny thing was, I never had a blood pressure issue. And I don't have a blood pressure issue now.
Cholesterol's
My
good.
cholesterol's good.
Okay.
Blood sugar's good.
Oh yeah, not
Yeah,
diabetic.
yeah,
Okay,
not
well,
diabetic.
I
Yeah,
mean,
which is what affects a lot of us. Yeah, I think that going back to my diagnosis for my transplant, it starts there. I went to the doctor 10 times prior to getting the diagnosis of heart failure.
what was going on with you?
I was short of breath. I actually came here one day, and you remember you opened the door, and it took me forever to get in the door, and you looked at me, and you said, "What's wrong with you?"
I just tore into you.
You tore into me. You tore into
I
me.
did. I
Because
was like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why are you walking so? And I felt terrible after your heart transplant because you never told
I never
me
told you.
that you had some real health
Right.
challenges.
Yeah, but and that's
A black man?
Yeah.
Why'd you keep it to your? Why was it a secret?
Because I didn't want people to. I didn't want to be. I didn't want people to think I was sickly, which is bizarre. 'Cause
But
people
you were
thought that anyway.
sickly.
I was sickly. B, I didn't want people to discount me. I didn't want people to say, "Well, he's half dead anyway." Because if people had found out to me, and this was where I was mentally, and this was why I speak to black men about this. We self-actualize so much through our vibrancy, our ability to do stuff, a lot of different things, and sometimes when health challenge, we'd rather press through a health challenge or just press on as opposed to get a seen about it. Because once you go to the doctor says you got this, then you got to deal with that. But if you just say I ain't feeling good, but I'm all right, then you press. So I didn't want to tell anybody.
But you were not all right.
This is a classic example of what you're talking about.
So
though.
that day you came to my door.
Mhm.
I mean, and I really did. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Why are you walking so slow? And then you had to go sit down.
That's
And
before.
it
Mhm.
never occurred to me that you were dealing with some health issues. I just thought maybe.
I was just lazy.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I know.
Yeah. Well, but that's how I felt. And again, the reason why I didn't say it, I didn't want people to look at me differently. I didn't even tell my congregation until, like, I was diagnosed at 17. I told them New Year's Eve, 18. So almost
Wow.
2 years went by before I mentioned it to the congregation. Now, the whole time they knew something was wrong with me. I mean, I was diagnosed by the congregants with 1,000 different things, but the reality was nobody knew.
Because you were retaining fluid.
I was retaining fluid. I was up to about 320 pounds. I mean, I could only hide it because I'm 6'2". It was a lot going on, and I didn't want anybody to know that was what was happening.
Wow.
Because I didn't want people to, because again, it's like I watched The Sopranos, you know that, and there was an episode where
Your ability to recite movies and lines is really incredible.
there was one episode where Corrado Soprano, who was the boss at the time, he said the first thing they do, they'll start counting you out. And I remember hearing that line. I remember a little bit later thinking the same thing. If I tell everybody that I've been given a certain amount of months to live, I don't get a transplant, people count me out.
Now, tell what was the basis of your needing a transplant?
So in January of 17, I got the flu. Back up a little bit. In November 2016, I went to get my physical because I wanted to play in the Woodward Academy alumni game. And I always wanted to get a physical before the game because I was going to be, giving my 100% effort. So I got my physical. Everything was fine.
8-ball. That
8-ball was
your,
going to give his best. He was going to give
that
his
was
best.
your nickname.
That was my nickname back in the 70s. But I got my physical. Everything was fine. EKG, stress test, all those things were fine. So, okay, we're good. So I go out and play the game. Everything's fine. January, I get the flu. And it was clear I had the flu. Doctor said, flu.
Had you gotten your flu vaccine?
That was the 1 year I didn't get my flu vaccine, so I can do a commercial about flu vaccines. I didn't get my flu vaccine. And so got the flu, probably a couple of weeks went by. The flu symptoms were gone, but I was just left a week. This went on all of February, and then March. So my birthday was March 6th. I got up to go to dinner and literally just couldn't get down the steps. Couldn't get to the car to go to dinner. I was going to my favorite restaurant, came back in the house, went to bed. Was just concerned. So I started going to the doctor. They said, well, it was probably colitis. They named 4 or 5 things that would cause me to retain water like I was. Nobody checked my heart because I just had a full physical in November. And so finally, on Palm Sunday, which was April 9th, 2017, well, April 8th, the day before, my oldest son was going to the prom, and the prom picture party was up on a hill. I got to the bottom of the hill, and it was as if I was climbing Mount Everest. I just couldn't do it. So I went back inside the car, and I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, something's wrong with me. I need to know. Even if it's bad, I want to know. And so the next morning was Palm Sunday. I got up, and I I got dressed, and this took me forever. It's crazy, and this is a crisis. I wanted to take a shower but couldn't stand, so I literally got a desk chair and put it in the shower so that I could take a shower.
And you were going to the doctor
I was going to
during
the
this
doctor
time.
each week.
So
Each
this
week.
this is a really valuable lesson. You did not get a flu vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
This is all these conversations about
Mm-hmm.
vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
You get the flu,
Mm-hmm.
and the flu, long
Okay.
after you're over the flu,
Mm-hmm.
leads to all this
Did
other
all this other
stuff.
stuff. That's what it was. It was called viral cardiomyopathy. You know, when you hear people don't die of the flu, it's always organ failure. The flu virus itself gets in our bodies. That's what causes the flu. 90% of people, their bodies kick it back out. 1 or 2% of people, it kills them like right then. And then that's about 7% of the people who their body kicks it out, but by the time it kicks it out, the damage has been done, and that's where I was. So I get to
But
that.
do you know why you were susceptible?
No, they ran a bunch of tests.
Because you didn't have underlying health.
I didn't have any other health issues. Yeah, just it was just the virus. The virus affected me. It was not even nothing because according to my doctors, it wasn't even anything that made me susceptible. It just happened. You know, I was in the 7% category that it affects and has long term damages. As a matter of fact, there's a young man who lives around the corner from me. A similar situation happened to him. He got what they think was the COVID back in 18. They think that was COVID, but they didn't know the name of it then. And he is waiting on a transplant as well.
Oh, wow.
Yep, yep.
Heart transplant.
Heart transplant, exactly. And he had, I mean, it was almost just similar to mine. He went out of town, except he went out of town, got sick out of town. They stabilized him, he flew back to America, went to the hospital, had a series of strokes, and just because of his heart.
How old is he?
He is now 38. I think he
Wow.
was about 37 at the time, 35 at the time.
Organ donations. Um, I remember telling Derek I wanted to be an organ donor. This was many years ago. And we had a very spirited discussion about this. And jokingly, I remember him saying, I don't know what you're going to need where you going. Like, so it's like, so don't put that on me. So it's on my driver's license.
Okay, right.
I hope it's on my driver's license because then there's some people like, oh no, I'm not gonna put it on my driver's license because they may take my organ.
Yeah, that's that thing
So
too.
talk about the mindset of people who are unwilling to be organ donors and how important it is.
So fundamentally, I get it. You know, I get the whole concern about I don't want to commit to being an organ donor because somebody more important than me could need my organ, and I don't want them to take it from me prematurely. I get that. You know, fundamentally, I get that argument. I can understand even the person without the education from a spiritual perspective. They're like, well, that's not right. I want to take my body with me. I want to have everything I need. But the Bible's clear about it. We're gonna have a whole new body, a glorified body. They won't use any of these parts because these
Tell
bodies.
your little buddy that. Okay?
No, I will. I'm gonna tell him that. I'm gonna tell him that. We get a brand new body, and the body won't have these same parts anyway. We won't look like we look. We won't have the possibility to decay with our new bodies. And so, I was probably, a matter of fact, I wasn't an organ donor until probably about 2012 or 2013. I went to an event by I can't think of it, I'm drawing a blank, but this guy named Bobby Howard was the president. He was a former football player. He had a kidney transplant, and he just expressed, the importance of, especially in the black community, it's importance of organ donors. And so that day, I signed a little card so that wherever I went, if something happened, they would know I had signed up to be an organ donor.
How long were you on the transplant list?
Roughly 935 days.
Roughly.
Roughly, yeah.
And you
It was exactly 935. I don't know why I said roughly. It was exactly 935 days.
and I remember you're sharing you had a friend who
Didn't make it.
didn't make it.
And he was 6 months younger than me. We played Little League baseball together. And he at one point had gone to the church. And I really just lost track of him when he moved. And I saw him in the waiting room one day. And he didn't make it to transplant. Now, the reason for it, and I should say this too, this is important, he had Medicaid. And Medicaid doesn't pay for transplants in Georgia.
That's
So,
insane.
It's
Medicaid
insane. Does not pay.
does not pay for organ transplants
Well,
in Georgia.
it doesn't pay for heart transplants. It pays for kidneys, liver, lungs, everything else.
Why not?
No, it's not even a law. It's like an administrative thing that is at the state, and we're working to try to change it. This hopefully 2024 will be the year. But it really doesn't even require like a House or Senate vote. It's an administrative change. Nobody even knows how it got there.
That's crazy.
And so Georgia outsources hearts to other states. And with the new technology, they got technology now.
So if you have Medicaid, you're you are poor, likely, can't afford private health insurance,
Or, or
or
you could be working and have a good job with insurance, but if you lose your job because of your health issue,
and
then you're back to Medicaid.
and that's a challenge for a lot of
For a lot of
people.
people, yeah,
They don't have sick leave and all these things that allow
that's
them to
it.
keep their health
Precisely.
insurance. They lose their job, lose their insurance, go on Medicaid.
And can't get a heart transplant.
That's insane.
Yep. Yep. It is one of the greater, and it's not even a race issue. It's an economic issue, quite frankly. Now, as it turns out, when I got my transplant, I was working at the city, and so my good friend at the time was the mayor, and she was kind enough to let me keep my job, and so,
It's a great man.
that's a great mayor. That's a great mayor right there. But so I was able to maintain my Blue Cross Blue Shield. But countless other people, I know them personally from my clinic and my heart transplant group, can't don't they can't maintain their jobs. And what if you got a great job making $60 an hour doing what's manual labor? The moment you can't do it anymore, the company says, okay, I'm sorry. You go to Medicaid and then you don't get the heart transplant. So, like I said, Georgia loses a lot of hearts. There's only 4 states that don't do this, and Georgia's one of them.
That is absolutely despicable.
People are moving from Georgia.
I mean,
to Florida.
the Center for Disease Control
It's here.
right here. We have some of the best institutions of higher learning right here in this state. And we don't cover heart transplants
correct.
for Medicaid patients.
For Medicaid. I know people who have moved to Florida. I know people who moved to Alabama to be on a heart transplant list at other hospitals. I've even known somebody who's moved to Tennessee.
Wow.
They moved their whole family to Tennessee to get a heart transplant because Georgia didn't take Medicaid.
So you obviously are healthy and whole. I joke with you when you came today because you were punctual, because you weren't punctual before your heart transplant.
That is true.
That young man must have been very punctual.
I feel like he was, because I've changed my ways.
Yeah. Your donor was 21.
He was 20.
20. And he died in a car accident.
Correct.
Well, thank God for his family.
His family,
willing
of course,
to donate his organs. I'm sure he saved a lot of lives.
A lot of lives. Because it was heart, 2 kidneys, lungs, even corneas.
Wow.
I'm missing in the liver.
And I just want to talk a little bit about prostate.
Okay.
And the challenges. We recently saw that Dexter King died of prostate cancer. We know lots of men who are still dying of prostate cancer. We often don't think of that because you think screenings and treatment are readily accessible, but obviously not.
Correct.
People are still dying.
Yeah, and unfortunately, again, it goes back to our black men, lack of desire to go to get checked out.
Colon,
all of the screenings.
mammograms for women,
Yep.
Having our annual exams to check for cervical cancer, pap smears, all those things. But again, many of us are fortunate enough to have health insurance and have access to this. So what about people who don't have health insurance?
I think, and one thing I give the city, this in the metropolitan area, credit for, there are enough free screenings that are available that you could take advantage of them. I don't even think necessarily the issue is lack of availability because of insurance. I just think it's a lack of desire to get it done, especially related to prostate.
Well, some people, like, they may not have insurance and they may not be able to take off work to go get their screening.
Most of the volunteer screenings and the different things that take place now on weekends. That's why we do it. Like I'm having one next month.
Some people work on weekends.
Well, but okay, and I agree with that. But I'm saying if a good body of people just don't go get them. Like I got friends who got insurance and all this stuff. When we read about Dexter King I sent out a message. Please, everybody, go get at least a PSA. That's just a blood draw. That doesn't require anything else.
Yeah.
But it should be done because it can ease up on you. Now, how I detected I had it was the year after I had my transplant. I went to my 1-year heart checkup, and they said, "Okay, you're good. Come back next year." So I was discharged, and it was crazy because I've been going to the doctor virtually every week for 3 years. So I was kind of confused, like, what am I supposed to do now? So I called my primary care physician, who I hadn't seen since before my transplant, and say, "Hey, I'm coming to check you out." So we came out there and we were just laughing and talking, and I had a chance to hear her about the whole journey. She says, "Well, while you're here, let me get check your PSA." And I was like, "Okay, cool."
Well, because you have been so concerned about other health challenges.
Yeah, for sure. And so keep this in mind. Prior to, like, the night before my transplant, they took the PSA. So that was October 31st, 2019. So my PSA was fine because they run another screen on you just before you transplant to make sure there's no cancer, no infection, none in your body. All right, so fast forward a year later, I go in, I get a PSA. She calls me the next day, hey, your PSA is high. And it was high in the sense that it had been 1.6, but it was like 3.8. Which is still not high, but well, why did it go from 1.6 to 3.8?
Does your family have a history of
It
prostate
is. It
cancer?
is. Both of my grandparents and two of my cousins. And so I was, concerned. So they sent me to a urologist, got all the tests run, said, okay, well, you have low grade prostate cancer, which is not uncommon for me and my age. But the problem was, since I'd had the transplant, I take anti-rejection medicine, which reduces your immune system. My body didn't have the capacity to fight as other people would. And so if I got some of the treatments that exist now to kind of just knock it out, it would knock me out too.
Well, and again, you didn't tell me that you had prostate cancer.
Okay. I don't like to stress you. You have a lot. You have a lot of stuff going on. I just didn't want to worry you unless it was a need to worry. If something got critical, I would call you.
Okay, well, I mean, it makes me question our friendship.
Okay,
All right.
No question of friendship.
Okay.
But so got it. So they gave me the option.
See how I made it about
Right,
me?
you flipped it. But they said what my options, and since I've had a couple of cousins who got prostatectomy, and nowadays it's not even what they got; it was just a lot less invasive. So got the prostatectomy, and I've been.
What is that?
Prostatectomy is they remove your prostate, and
Okay.
in doing so remove the cancer.
Now, some men are afraid of the exams because they are a little invasive, I guess. And then they are concerned about, whether or not they'll be able to perform sexually. And I won't get into all that with you. But should people be concerned about that?
I mean, I wanted to live. I had come too far to allow to roll the dice. I could have, hoped for the best. They could have done the radiation or the chemo, but that would have made me sicker. And so to me, to remove it and wait whatever time it took, and to be back restored was worth it to me because I had come too far, to live to quit over something that could be addressed. So they did the bone scan, everything was clear, got the surgery. I keep going back every 6 months now for a PSA check, and I've been fine, thank the Lord, and just can keep, I just want,
You got some good health insurance. Sit over that lady. You've gotten your money.
I have. No, I have.
Prostate.
I've had 4 surgeries.
Transplant.
I had 4.
The hip. What was the fourth
Well,
one?
I had a pacemaker put in before the transplant.
Oh, good grief.
Yeah, so I've had 4.
What was the pacemaker for?
That was prior to transplant. So
So that was all a part of all of that. Okay.
But it's surgery, so it's kind of interesting.
Now, what happened to your hip?
I was a high level athlete back in the 80s, and I had a hip injury, and so it just kind of digressed over time. And so once my heart was working great, I was like, I'm walking funny because you remember I walk kind of funny.
Well, I remember when you came to the door out of breath. I was
Right.
like, you can't walk. Like you're out of breath. You're like dragging one leg.
Yeah, it was awful.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, I was breaking down, but got the hip replaced and have been running ever since. Like I'm actually like really, really much more active. So they have what's called the Transplant Olympics, and it's in Birmingham in July, and I'll be participating this year.
Well, what's your sport?
I'm gonna play tennis. I was you remember I was former big time tennis player.
Yeah, I mean, you and Arthur Ashe.
It was just the two of us.
Black man
Black
having
man,
a time
that's
out
what we
there.
got to do. But I'm just looking forward to participating. I
That's
was
great.
excited about it. Yeah, we have a transplant support group, and there's a few other. It's a good group of people. Matter of fact, the mayor of, I want to say Hogansville, but I might be missing the city. But he won the gold last year.
Wow.
It's an international. It's like
That's really
all
cool.
transplant. So it's kind of I'm looking forward to it. But having the main thing about the hip was quality of life, and this is what my orthopedic surgeon said. He said one was to save your life, which is a transplant, and this was a quality of life because being able to walk and ease and without the pain,
Yeah.
because even when you have a joint, whether it's hip or knee, it hurts. You can be sitting still or laying down, and so just now getting a good night's sleep is a big deal. So it's helping me be fresher.
So, what's the message to people about your mental health, physical health, and spiritual health?
That it should be a priority, no matter what your age is. If you're young, take care of yourself. Sometimes things start earlier in life, and you want to be on top of that, especially if your family has history. With your mental health, it's important. Our nation now is in a different space with social media. Exposes people to things that probably normal people wouldn't be exposed to. So mental health is important just because you can get depressed if you read the news long enough. Spiritual health, of course, important because it leads to eternal life. And so I encourage younger people. We've had a great influx of young people in my church, and they sent me a list of things just the other day of what things they want to discuss. And those 3 things were on there. And it was really interesting that you just said it, because when you were reading them off, I was like, that's what they just said. They said, we want to talk about spiritual health, how to be strong in the Lord. We want to talk about taking care of ourselves. We want to talk about, because with the job stresses. Because I think that working from home actually can be a stress. I'm not sure. Some people say it is.
You know, it's funny now that I work from home a lot. It takes a lot for me to go out and navigate around people. In fact, I've even said I've got to start leaving home more. You know, I'm on Zooms and I feel like I'm still interacting with people, but going out physically. Just even the length of time it takes me to get dressed because I'm so used to dressing from the waist up. Yeah. I'm like, oh gosh, what shoes I put on and navigating traffic and whatever the case may be. And we are created to be in fellowship and to be around one another. I mean, I love working. Yeah. I love the flexibility that you have from working from home, but it does create its own set of anxieties.
Right.
And when you turn it off, that's what I struggle with a lot. Right. Even when I get in bed to get ready to go to bed, you can see I'm like, well, okay, what else did I not finish up today? Because, and I remember my chief of staff, Carmen Chubb, saying, we've gone from working from home to living from work. I think is what she said. Yeah.
And think about you even have a break. So you do have the family, people coming home from school there. But think about the young person or the older person who's living in a city that maybe they don't know anybody and they work from home. Think about the isolation they feel.
Yeah.
Think about the fact that the only time they connect with people is at Publix or Kroger near their house. And that's
not if you use Instacart.
Yeah, not if you use Instacart. Good point. Good point. So you could just literally be by yourself all the time, and that creates a level of isolation that can lead to depression, which is why I go back to mental health. Those things are very subtle, but they're real. You can be so isolated that you just feel disconnected.
So you can still have your faith, exercise your faith, be full on in your faith, and still go see somebody about your mental health and your physical health.
I encourage it. I go well beyond thinking it's a good thing. I encourage it.
All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure. I'm so glad to be here. I've watched it and I'm glad to be a part of it.
All right. Thank you.